a lot of us are feeling this awful mix of exhaustion and fear and resignation, which is pushing a lot of activists, a lot of citizens to the sidelines. What the small d democratic opposition needs is fresh blood.
Stephen Levitsky, welcome to Offline.
Thanks for having me, John.
So, things are bad when How Democracies Die author is out there writing pieces a few weeks into Trump 2.0. You write in Foreign Affairs, quote, U.S. democracy will likely break down during the second Trump administration, but that what lies ahead is not fascist or single-party dictatorship, but competitive authoritarianism. Can you explain for people what competitive authoritarianism is and what it looks like?
Yeah, competitive authoritarianism is kind of a hybrid between democracy and authoritarianism. The constitutional architecture of democracy remains intact. There continue to be elections. The opposition is legal, operates above ground. But systematic incumbent abuse of the state, weaponization of the machinery of government, and deployment against rivals, against opposition, tilts the playing field against the opposition so that there is competition. It's not single party rule, but competition is unfair. And there are abuses of power that are not something that we associate with democracy. So this is contemporary Hungary, contemporary Turkey, Venezuela under Hugo Chavez, Peru in the 1990s, a bunch of sort of middle-income countries, post-communist countries, slid in and out of competitive authoritarianism in the 1990s, early 2000s. It's just not something that we ever would have anticipated emerging, or that I ever would. I wrote a book about this in 2010. Just never, ever imagined that we'd be talking about competitive authoritarianism in the United States.
Why do you think that competitive authoritarianism is the de facto model for authoritarianism in today's world? Like, what about contemporary society makes traditional authoritarianism, like, the Axis powers or what North Korea is, less plausible?
Well, the main reason is that since the end of the Cold War, democracy, electoral democracy, continues to have a lot of legitimacy. No, with the exception of maybe parts of the Middle East and maybe China, there are very few places where an alternative to electoral democracy is really considered legitimate. People like to vote. People like the idea of being able to choose their leaders. So it's really hard in the 21st century to just eliminate elections and have, say, a single party rule or military dictatorship of the kind that we saw a lot of in the 1970s. So democracy continues to be pretty close to being the only game in town. So because it's so hard to just completely derail democracy and eliminate democratic institutions, elected leaders, autocrats, like to cheat. They kind of create a Potemkin village facade of democracy, but try to abuse power within it. And so that's become very, very common since the end of the Cold War.
So I know the transition from democracy to autocracy is more of a sliding scale than an on-off switch, especially in the modern era. But what do you see as the primary differences between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0 that makes this version seem more like competitive authoritarianism to you?
Oh, there are a bunch of differences. I mean, one of the great problems in recent months is that an awful lot of Americans responded to Trump's victory in 2024 with a shrug, because they said, well, the first time people like Levitsky started, talking about democracy dying, and we were fine, we survived. But the context is really different. First, in the first time around, Trump didn't think he was going to win. He had no plan. He had no team. He did not control the Republican Party. So he didn't understand how the machinery of government even worked. He believed when he began his presidency that all the institutions of the state were there at his beck and call, that he would be able to get public servants across the U.S. government to work towards his own personal and political ends. It was shocked and angered to find out that things don't work that way. So he governed, for the most part, to his first term with either conservative technocrats or more or less traditional Republicans, and they constrained him. He didn't have a plan for overturning democracy, and he relied on more or less establishment figures who, at critical points, constrained him. And second time around is very different. First of all, he has a better sense of what he wants to do. Very importantly, he does have a team and a set of ideologues around him who have been planning for 4 years for this weaponization of the state that we're seeing. And third, and crucially, he now owns the Republican Party. There is no resistance from within the Republican Party whatsoever. And that party, of course, controls both houses of Congress. So Trump is in a much, much better position to impose his will. He's much less constrained than he was first time around. It's really night and day.
You say in the piece that, competitive authoritarianism under Trump will transform political life in the United States. For people who might be following the news and seeing the chaos, but are not sure how it's actually going to transform political life here, could you talk about what that might look like for people, like what might be in store for us?
Sure. A number of different individuals and organizations across the country are going to have to think hard about the consequences of their behavior. Those who wanted to write a check to a Democratic Party candidate in the past and would do so, maybe thinking about their bank account, but beyond that, wouldn't have to think about the consequences. Now are going to have to worry about maybe they're increasing the likelihood of an IRS investigation or audit if they become a Democratic Party donor. Universities are having to think about what kinds of policies they carry out, about who they hire, who they promote, what they teach. We're seeing a dramatic consequence of this with the city of New York, right? The mayor of New York is supposed to be elected by the people of New York and is supposed to govern on behalf of the people of New York, and is now basically co-opted by the federal government. It is going to have to carry out policies, not that the voters of New York want, but that Donald Trump wants, because if he doesn't, he's going to get a suspended investigation or suspended charges waged against him, right? This is the weaponization of the state means that a whole series of carrots and sticks are deployed to change the way people behave. No longer are we going to be able to think just in terms of our, what's best for our career, what's best for our job, what's best for our constituents. We're going to have to worry about the consequences in terms of investigation, in terms of online harassment, in terms of tax audits for our behavior. And that is life under authoritarian rule. Soft authoritarianism, but authoritarianism nevertheless.
Yeah, we've obviously been thinking about this a lot since we do both politics and media here.
Yeah.
Every media organization, including ours, now faces the prospect of, frivolous, costly, debilitating defamation suits from Trump, someone else, not to mention potential investigations by the FCC, DOJ, another government agency. We're already seeing this with some media organizations. From where you sit, is there anything that can be done about this? Or like what are the best strategies for opposition forces or media outlets to fight this?
Well, I think there's a collective action problem because almost all the actors involved, whether it's the CBS News, ABC News, Harvard University, Democratic Party politicians, mayors, governors, there's a whole set of pretty powerful actors who, if they got to, first of all, who believe in democracy at the end of the day, would rather have a democracy than an authoritarian regime. And who, if they acted together, could exert a fair amount of power. But they face a collective action problem because every CEO, every university president, every media owner or editor has to worry about their organization, right? Every CEO's got to take care of his or her shareholders. Every university president's got to take care of their endowment, make sure they don't get a federal funding cut. And so the behavior to take care of your own organization requires making compromises or maybe shutting up, maybe not engaging in the kind of opposition behavior that would perhaps weaken the government. And so what is rational for the president of Harvard, what is rational for the CEO of major corporations, what is rational maybe for particular governors and mayors is to adopt a very pragmatic response, often to move to the sidelines, to silence themselves. The collective cost of that is a weaker opposition, is a quieter opposition. What we need to do is the opposite of that. It's not easy, but I think one of the great myths of the last 2 months has been that resistance failed the first time around. I mean, that is just a ridiculous claim. The resistance, the opposition to Trump in the first term blocked his most abusive initiatives, led to his defeat in the 2018 election, and then his defeat in 2020, removal from power. So the resistance stopped Trump in his tracks and removed him from power as soon as was legally possible. I measure that as a success. There's no way to stop an authoritarian power grab by remaining silent. It requires resistance. Resistance takes place on all sorts of fronts. Ultimately, we're not going to be able to really change the balance of power until the midterm elections. But we've got to begin to move public opinion, and that only happens when influential figures speak out, when university presidents speak out, when CEOs speak out, when religious leaders speak out. Remaining silent is not going to do it.
Offline is brought to you by Manicura Honey. Are you looking for something simple and delicious to add to your wellness routine? I think if you are, Tommy, you could use some honey, but not just any honey. Manicura Honey. It's rich, creamy, and the most delicious honey you've ever had. And I know what you're wondering. You're like, is it ethically produced?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's by Manicura's master beekeepers who are in the remote forests of New Zealand. Where I'll be soon. Manicura honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. The bees collect the nectar from the Manuka tea tree in New Zealand. The nectar is packed with bioactives, and the honey that is produced has 3 times more antioxidants and prebiotics than your average honey. A special antibacterial compound called MGO also comes from the nectar of the tea tree. Manicura third-party tests every single harvest for MGO. It makes these results available through their QR system. It's a game changer, and all you need is 1 heaped teaspoon each morning to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manuka. Additional usage through the day is completely fine, especially helping to cut out other sweeteners. It's a honey with superpowers. Now it's easier than ever to try Manicura honey. Head to manicura.com/offline to get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MGO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. That's manicura.com/offline for $25 off your starter kit. Offline is brought to you by ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol. Let me tell you, there's a surefire way to wake up feeling fresh after a night of drinking. It's with pre-alcohol. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. My only problem with ZBiotics is remembering to take it.
Is running out of it. Yeah, I just want to be very direct here. If you're having drinks and you're over 30, and if you're doing it on a school night and you're not taking ZBiotics, you're an idiot.
You're an idiot.
And you do not deserve to live in this country and be a citizen. I don't know. I don't have a drink without ZBiotics.
I think you're better at remembering. I went out last weekend, totally forgot the ZBiotics. I'm an idiot. With pre-alcohol, I can stay on track and not let winter travel and celebrations throw me off course. I hate when a celebration throws me off course. Go to zbiotics.com/offline to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use offline at checkout. ZBiotics is back with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/offline and use the code offline at checkout for 15% off. How would you characterize the state of the opposition right now, and why do you think it feels so different than it did in 2017?
I've been trying to figure that out since the day after the election. Obviously there is a mix of fear, of exhaustion, of resignation, in some cases of pragmatism and opportunism, but mostly fear, exhaustion, and resignation. People, including me, have been doing this for 8 years. And to see Donald Trump not only come back to power, but win the popular vote was incredibly demoralizing. And the fact that he won the popular vote, even though it was one of the narrowest victories in modern history, really legitimized his whole project in many people's eyes. And it was a gut punch. That said, I think the Democratic Party is in much. There are a number of long-term issues for, I think, the center left across the democratic world, but the Democratic Party is in much better shape than oppositions in other competitive authoritarian regimes. You have a single unified opposition, which doesn't exist in Hungary or Turkey and other places. It's clearly electorally viable. Yes, it lost by 1.5 percentage points in 2024, but won a series of elections prior to that. It's pretty well organized. It remains pretty well financed. There's no reason why the Democrats can't go out and win the 2026 election, despite the Trump administration's abuses. So it's been demoralizing to watch just how stunned and groggy the opposition was in the initial weeks, but we're already seeing the party begin to react, and I think the Democratic Party's ability to compete in elections is not in serious doubt.
The other challenge that I think about a lot, that we talk about a lot on this show, is, and this is a change from 2017, and it's just gotten worse since 2017, which is the information environment has become so polluted and degraded. I'm not just talking about misinformation and propaganda here, though there's plenty of that, but our ability and willingness to keep our attention on what's happening and to direct other people's attention toward what's happening. And the fact that there are so many different sources of information, and the media environment has become so atomized at this point and splintered, that it's become really hard to get people to pay attention. And, we were talking about the collective action problem in terms of sort of the organized opposition, but it feels like there's almost a broader issue in the country where, you might see all the chaos and not be too thrilled with Trump, but you're like, if I don't speak out, or if I don't, organize, or if I don't seem supportive of the opposition, then I can just live a pretty decent life with my family. And that's probably more important than figuring this out. And, maybe Trump will burn himself out and I can just ignore him for 4 years. How do you think about that challenge in this environment?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, there's always a danger in an authoritarian setting of too many people just saying, well, this isn't directly affecting me. I kept my job. My kids are okay. I'm just going to keep my head down for 4 years. That's a danger in every authoritarian situation. In terms of the changing information environment, this is very recent. I'm still trying to get my head around how this new information environment works and how many people it affects. I buy the argument about the attention economy, and I think it probably is the case that Democrats have been a little slower than Trump and some of his allies in sort of learning how to capture attention in the contemporary era. I don't think we know, though, how many people that affects. I mean, I don't think that's the reason, frankly, why the Democrats lost the 2024 election. The Democrats lost the 2024 election primarily because incumbents are losing elections since COVID all over the world. I did a count right after the election of all the democracies in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Latin America, North America, Australia, New Zealand, 55 elections since COVID hit. Incumbents were thrown out of power 41 out of 55 times. 80% of the time, incumbents lost. People are really grumpy post-COVID. Whatever the information environment, in all democracies, people were poised to throw out the incumbents. I'm not sure, and I think that's going to work in the Democrats' benefit in the years to come. They should not wait around for Trump to lose support, for sure. But Trump will lose support. I don't think the information environment is so fragmented and that we're in such bubbles that Trump's 49% is going to remain at 49%. No, it's probably going to decline. People are aware, particularly if the economy does not go well, particularly if prices don't come down, particularly if they dismantle the key aspects of the federal government. And so the government becomes much worse at solving people's problems. I suspect that people are going to be well aware of that, and that the Democratic politicians have to learn how to work this new information environment. But I don't think that's going to prevent Americans from becoming aware of what's going on in the Trump administration.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, one thing your piece really hammers home is that public opinion matters. And when authoritarian leaders are more popular, there's less resistance. Trump is more popular than he's ever been, but as you mentioned, he's still around 50% and falling in the last couple of weeks since he's taken office. How do you think about the ability for the opposition to move public opinion in a competitive authoritarian system? And are there examples in other places, except for, I guess, ours in 2020, but where public opinion can actually be shifted by the opposition and different strategies and tactics that they may have used?
I mean, it's especially today. I mean, one of the good things about this new media environment is the old-fashioned strategies of buying off the major television networks or the major newspapers don't work anymore, because it's really easy for people to get access to information online. And so it's harder today for autocrats to manipulate public opinion than it ever was before. That's one of the benefits of the internet and social media. So in Hungary is one case where Orban has been able to maintain an unusually high level of public support, and that does seem to have to do with his ability to manipulate the media environment. But Erdogan's lost a lot of support in Turkey. Maduro, God knows, has not been able to, despite his control of the mainstream media, has been not able to maintain public support. The few who maintain a lot of support, like Bukele and Putin, are actually legitimately very, very popular. So I don't think there's any reason why. I mean, the thing about Trump is he's got a ceiling, as you said. He's not going to get over 50%, which I think is helps protect us. But he's also got a floor. And the autocrats who really flail are the ones who become really unpopular. The president of one of the reasons why the president of South Korea completely failed in his effort to impose martial law is he had a 20% approval rating. He was really, really unpopular. So Trump's in the middle. He's not popular enough to be able to just immediately trample on democratic institutions and get away with it. But he's never going to be unpopular enough that he becomes politically isolated, unfortunately.
Yeah. Ezra Klein wrote a piece about the first few weeks of Trump called "Don't Believe Him," where he argues, quote, "Trump is acting like a king because he's too weak to govern like a president. He's trying to substitute perception for reality. He's hoping that perception then becomes reality. That can only happen if we believe him. The first 2 weeks of Trump's presidency have not shown his strength. He's trying to persuade you of something that isn't true. Don't believe him." What do you make of that argument?
There's a lot to that, in that an awful lot of what Trump is doing is show, are executive decrees that don't do very much, or that are likely eventually to be stalled or blocked or overturned in the courts. It's not entirely true, though. I mean, the co-optation of the city government of New York, that's real. That's happening. That's a big deal. The pressure that was placed on the parent companies of ABC and CBS News to settle frivolous lawsuits that they easily would have won, that's a major blow to press freedom. That's real. That arm twisting is real. And the damage that Musk and Doge are going to do to the federal government, some of it will be repaired, some of it they'll be forced to abandon, but they're going to really weaken our civil service and our government. That's going to affect many, many people's lives, whether we believe it or not. So I take Ezra's point in the sense that it's really important that we not be cowed into submission or into hiding under our desks by Trump's symbolic exertion of power, because most of it is symbolic. But he's doing damage day to day, and we've got to get out and fight it.
Offline is brought to you by Lumen. Did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you will feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life? Lumen is a valuable tool that gives you insights to create a healthy metabolism for your body. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen the first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. They then give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time, and Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. We got people all over the office using Lumen. You wake up in the morning, you breathe into it, and it's like, ugh, you're disgusting. Go work out. Maybe eat something healthier.
Or it's nice to you.
Or it's nice to you if you've been following along. So that's important too. You want the approval of your Lumen. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. Optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, and more. Take the next step to improving your health. Go to lumen.me/offline to get 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/offline for 20% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Just going to talk about the importance of therapy here. Maybe some of you have been in therapy, maybe some of you haven't. And here's the deal. Everyone actually needs therapy. You think you don't need therapy? Therapy is not like, oh, something's wrong with you, go to therapy. Therapy is just like someone to talk to, hour a week. You sit there, you talk about your feelings, talk about what's on your mind. And unlike friends, they're obligated to listen. And they don't just pretend to listen. They're really listening, and it's really helpful. Usually makes you feel better, makes me feel better every time I go to therapy. So I would highly recommend it. And if you want to give therapy a try, and you don't want to leave your house, you can use BetterHelp. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable and convenient, serving over 5 million people worldwide. Access a diverse network of more than 30,000 credentialed therapists with a wide range of specialties. You can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/offline to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/offline. I've thought a lot for the last several years about what draws people and entire societies to authoritarians. You mentioned that a leader like Putin is legitimately popular. And, as we saw, Trump has gotten more popular over time. Hannah Arendt believed that one reason people are attracted to dictators is what she called atomization, or, a disconnectedness with society that can breed loneliness. And this is, again, something we talk a lot about on this show, but how much do you think that our social alienation, loneliness, especially post-COVID, is contributing to some of the instability we're seeing here and across the world? And if so, does that give us a sign of how we might start to organize collectively to oppose authoritarian movements?
Well, I'm no Hannah Arendt. I don't have a great answer to that question. I mean, I think I'm not sure. There's clearly a discontent in democracies across the West since COVID. There's no question about it, and that discontent is leading to the election of more populist figures who basically promise to take a wrecking ball to the status quo, to just break the status quo. I mean, it's we see this in Argentina. We've seen it in to a degree in Mexico and El Salvador, and we're seeing it in the United States. I mean, that people will be cheering on the just sort of reckless dismantling of the U.S. government is stunning. I think few of us would have expected it a decade ago. So there is a level of discontent that's behind this. But look, more than atomized, we're polarized. Half this country wants nothing to do and will never want anything to do with what Trump is doing, and never has supported Trump and never will support Trump. It's a third of this country, a little more than a third of the country, that is energetically behind Trump and Trumpism, that is enthusiastically embracing the wrecking ball that is Trump. That's important. We need to understand that. But it's not a majority of Americans. Trump won the election not because we're in an Arendtian state of atomization. Trump won because people were unhappy with the status quo, particularly with the economy, and they voted for the opposition. We have a two-party system, and when people are unhappy with the status quo, they vote for the opposition. It's not true that 49.8% of the U.S. electorate voted for authoritarianism. They voted for the opposition. Some people voted for authoritarianism, but a lot of them just voted for the opposition party.
So, this is like one advantage we have, right? That Trump's popularity is still hovering around 50%. What are other advantages that you think the United States has, either at this moment or just structurally, that other countries that have slid into competitive authoritarianism didn't have?
First of all, we're a really wealthy country with a big civil society and a big private sector, and as scandalous as it was to see people like Zuckerberg and Bezos on their knees, there are still a lot of billionaires and multimillionaires out there who are willing and able to finance the opposition, to finance pro-democracy groups, civil society organizations, universities, and Democratic Party candidates. Whoever the Democratic Party candidate is in 2028 is probably going to be able to finance themselves pretty easily. And that's critical. In really effective authoritarian regimes, Turkey, Hungary, Venezuela, especially Russia, oppositions are starved out of existence because the private sector is too terrified to fund the opposition. So a wealthy private sector is really helpful. And then there are a couple of institutional advantages that are not guaranteed and eventually can get worn down, but a highly professionalized military that is not going to be easily mobilized for extra constitutional behavior. So, the best way to shut down to shut down a democracy is to get the military behind you. Most presidential coups involve an alliance with the military. That is not going to happen immediately. Still, the upper ranks of the military are very, very professionalized. And we have a pretty independent judiciary. That can change. And we've seen some Trump appointees that are really kind of in the bag for Trump. And that could worsen over time eventually. But for now, we can rely on a pretty independent judiciary. And, I got to say, even a month ago, when we wrote this foreign affairs piece, we didn't anticipate a serious challenge to judicial rulings, the kind of stuff that J.D. Vance has been talking about this week. I have no idea whether the administration would follow up on those sorts of threats. But, if they ignore the judiciary, that puts us in a different ballgame, a much more dangerous ballgame. But for now, an independent and powerful judiciary, a highly professionalized military, and a pretty wealthy, well-endowed civil society, private sector, are three advantages that oppositions in Hungary, Turkey, Russia, Venezuela didn't have.
Do you have examples of where a democracy successfully restored its guardrails after a period of severe democratic erosion?
There are lots of cases of democratic oppositions winning power back. There are fewer cases of a quick restoration of the old guardrails. So the case to watch, I think, is Poland, where there's the Democratic opposition won power back a couple of years ago, and it's hard. After the machinery of government's been weaponized and partisan allies are placed throughout the state, it's hard to go back and restore the state the way it was before. And it's been a very difficult chore for the current government in Poland, but that's probably the closest case to watch of a. I mean, there are other cases of sort of long-term periods of authoritarian rule, the collapse of dictatorship, like in Spain or in Chile, but that's not what this is. This is a sort of a slide into an authoritarian government, a pretty good chance that the opposition wins the next election. And I think that the problem is going to be precisely what you point to, that the norms have been shot to hell, and a lot of the rules have been twisted, manipulated, weakened, and it's just a lot easier to break democratic institutions than it is to rebuild them. And my guess is we're going to take a couple of steps back, and then we'll be able to take a step forward. But it's going to be very hard to get back to where we were in, say, the Obama era.
So you're a professor. What are you saying to your students to try to stave off the fatigue and disillusionment that so many young people might be feeling right now, and sort of, wave the flag for democracy as you are trying to send off a lot of young students, hopefully inspired to go change the world?
I tell them it's their turn. I tell them that that a lot of us have been out there for the last 8 years fighting for democracy with a mixed record. We certainly did not prevent Trump from coming back to power. And my 18, 19, 20-year-old students, it's time for them to stand up. And they were young when Trump was first elected. Most of them were too young to be part of the so-called resistance the first time around. It's their term. I mean, as we noted earlier in this conversation, a lot of us are feeling this awful mix of exhaustion and fear and resignation, which is pushing a lot of activists, a lot of citizens to the sidelines. What the small d democratic opposition needs is fresh blood. And I think it's very likely that college students will lead the way in the opposition this time around.
I hope so. Dr. Steve Levitsky, thank you so much for joining Offline and for everything you've been doing to really help put this in context for us and give us a bit of a path forward. So appreciate that.
Thanks so much for having me on.